right, everybody. So, Noah, think of a place where you experience peace. Where do you go to, get away and be peaceful?
My room.
Your room? Okay. Hannah, where do you experience peace? Where do you go to be alone?
Anywhere by myself.
Like where? Like a specific place that you go to.
I can't see my room. My living room.
Your living room, okay. Opedia, where do you go? What do you do to experience peace and be alone?
Parking lot on apartments in my car.
That's good. Well, for you guys, it might be your room or your living room or, a parking lot, which I relate to that one too. But for me, oddly enough, when I think of being alone and being in peace, I think of a forest. And you guys know me, I hate being outside. I hate the wind, I hate being cold, I hate bugs, all of it. But I experience so much peace when I think about, notice I said think about. I didn't say go to a forest, I ain't going to a forest. But I think about a forest, and that's where I experience peace, and that's where I am in my secret space. Hannah mentioned that wherever I'm alone. Well, same here, because I visualize in my head being in a forest when I need to be in peace. And so today, what I'm trying to say here is that you need to have a space or a place that you go when you want to experience peace and loneliness with God. So today I'm going to be talking about the importance of being lonely. Okay? And so before I start, I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about who I am and what I've been through so that you guys can kind of get some context. Before I came here, I had helped my dad start his church. So I've been involved in ministry since I was about a freshman in high school, and now I'm 23, about to turn 24, hello. And kind of old, but about I don't know, I can't do math right now, but it's been a minute, it's been a long time helping my dad start his church and doing this church planting. And I've gone through everything from working in kids, to working in youth, to teaching, to leading worship, to going to different places in the United States and just worshiping God and experiencing God in a different way. But it was about this time, about last year, 2021, where I experienced my first church burnout. And that was the hardest time of my life, because I had started this new church with my dad because we had gone through a church split. And so I was in go mode since we were in this church split, right? And so I was in go mode and until about December, and all of a sudden I was playing at an event, and I was playing drums, and I literally cannot tell you that I cannot stress it enough that I cannot hear any of the music. And my friend had mentioned to me that I was experiencing this, but I didn't believe him, and he had invited me to go to Tulsa with him. And so I went to Tulsa with him because I had told him that night that, dude, I'm experiencing church burnout. I'm burnt out. I can't do this anymore. And so what I want to tell you guys and what I want to stress about it is that in ministry and when you're going through it, it is important to have this space with God, this place that you go to. I had to go in a sabbatical to Tulsa and all these places, which was cool. It was a great experience. I loved every moment of it. But in this time alone, this time away from my family, from my church, from the people I surrounded myself with, into a new environment, I learned a lot of things. I learned that, first off, I don't know what I want to do with my life. Secondly, what do I do if it's not God, if it's not ministry? And thirdly, where do I see myself with God? Who is God to me? And this stuff was coming and going into my life as I was going. So I have 4 points that I want to talk to you guys about. 4 points that, talk about, being in this loneliness, right? So the first one is remember where you come from. Okay. For me, I remember moments where I wasn't in ministry. I would just be, listening to a sermon or worshiping God in an empty space, or being alone and just searching for God. Remember those moments. Remember those moments where it was just you and him. Don't talk about it to anybody else, because God will publicly show that, but remember those moments, because that's where you find God. That's where you hear from God. What did David, we think of David in the Bible. He was called to be a king, right? And when Samuel comes to anoint him, we see that David did what? He went back into shepherding, because he wasn't a king yet. And so it's important to remember where you come from, because even when David failed, right? Even when David failed with Bathsheba, he remembered to go back to that space that he was. He didn't go physically back to shepherding, but he went back to that space with God to ask him, hey, I need you. Don't ever leave me. Don't ever forsake me. All these things. We see it in Psalms 51, that he starts to pray to God and cry out. The second thing I want you to get out of this is experience loneliness with God. When coming here to Kenosha, I've experienced so much loneliness, but I've been okay. And when I was in Tulsa, I experienced so much loneliness, but I was okay. Why? Because I experienced that loneliness with God. And in those moments, I was able to hear from God the most I had ever heard from him in my life. It wasn't because my friend was telling me to do this. It wasn't because you were telling me to do this, or my family was or I had to do this church thing. Like, it was genuinely because I felt called from God. And in those lonely times, that's when you hear most from God. Third thing I want to talk to you guys is sit and listen. It's so important. We see that in the book of 1 Kings, that Elijah has just done this big thing for God. He had prayed for fire to fall from heaven, but he gets scared at the moment when rough time starts to come into his life, right? And so we see that he goes to the mountain, right? And we see that there is wind and there is fire, and then there's all these things. Distractions start to come in his life, and he asks God, like, haven't I served you correctly? Why am I going through this right now? And God said, not in these fire or this wind or anything like that. He said, he came to him in a whisper. So always try to listen and sit and be patient for God. Because what did God tell him to do in that moment? He told him to go back, because he wasn't done, right? And then lastly, I'd like to say, take time away when things get rough. Like I said before, Elijah was going through all these things. He went to the mountain. We see Moses go to the mountain. We see David go back to that space. We see Jesus at times go to his Father, pray, cry out to him. So when things get rough, when things get hard in ministry, when you feel like you're overwhelmed, or you feel like you have no direction, go back to where you come from. So, what did we learn today? Remember where you come from. R, experience loneliness with God. E, take time away from God take time away when things get rough. T, sit and listen. S, take time away when things get rough. T, what does that spell? Rest. So rest in God, and it's okay to take time and rest. Even in ministry, when everything seems to be going all the way, like this world, things are always happening, but it's okay to take time and rest. So experience loneliness, but with God.